This is the part of the service where I try to unsuccessfully follow that up, so bear with me. Before we get started with the sermon, first service, I made an acknowledgement that the technology does not always cooperate. So I'm sorry for those of you online. I'm very, very sorry if the technology does not cooperate. Second of all, Dan didn't finish bragging on Craig, but Craig gave him a washer and then helped move the washer into the house, which is an extreme act of generosity. So, if you see him, brag on him. Let him know that everyone knows now, all right? This week we're starting a new series called Can I Get a Witness? Which this church is just really, I'm sorry, y'all are just too white to appreciate that. But can I get a witness? And it was inspired by two particular things. First of all, it was inspired by a wonderful song by an individual by the name of Jordan Feliz. Jordan Feliz, Can I Get a Witness? Great song. You guys should look it up. Christian song. It's awesome. Second of all, it was inspired by a term that came into vogue actually in like the late 1800s. We don't hear it so much anymore. And that term is star witness. Star witness. It is a noun. It is the principal or most important witness in a trial. Principal or most important witness in a trial. And that term kind of inspired this sermon in this way. You see, a star witness is the individual on which an entire case hinges. Their words, their testimony can determine life or death, can determine guilt or innocence. That individual in a very real way holds the future of another person in their hands. And as such, the prosecutors tend to treat them very specially. You see, prosecutors in the United States have the ability to take witnesses before a trial, kind of behind closed doors, and tell them, hey, these are the things that you should include, these are the things that you shouldn't include, to be the most effective witness possible, right? And prosecutors obviously take advantage of this opportunity, at least the good ones do. Well, they tell them, hey, these are the parts of the story you need to include, this is what you need to leave out, this is how you can be the best possible witness. Now, I'm telling you this because we use that term witness in Christianity a lot. It's kind of become this Christianese term, but we don't mean it in the sense of someone who is going to a trial to determine the guilt or innocence of someone else, or to aid the judge or the jury in doing so. When we say witness, we use it in the sense of going out and telling others about Jesus. Rather than witnessing to a crime, you're witnessing to a Christ. Rather than going to a trial, you're going to the world, right? We use this term witness all the time. Unfortunately, most of us don't have the advantages that actual witnesses in real trials have. We are not coached. We are not prepped or prepared. We feel very unready to go out into the world and to tell others about our Savior. We feel very unprepared to be a star witness. So today we want to ask a question. When we are unprepared, when we are unready, when we are uncoached, can we still confidently and effectively witness to others? Can we still tell others about Jesus and actually have a real effect when we are uncoached, when we are unprepared, when we feel unready? And to answer that question, we're going to examine two different stories. We're going to examine a somewhat longer story and then just a little snippet of a shorter story that both take place in the exact same region. And to help you wrap your minds around where exactly this is happening and really just hammer it home that this is happening in the exact same place, I brought a map. And this map, just in case you don't know what it is, off to your left side over that way, there is a big blue body of water that's known the world around as the Mediterranean Sea. Right there in the center, there's this kind of really big lake that's called the Sea of Galilee. Luke calls it the Lake Gennesaret. Other places call it the Lake Tiberias. 3 different names, all the same place. We usually call it the Sea of Galilee. Now, if you've been in the church for a long time, you might recognize one of those regions nearby. It is the region of the state of the province of Galilee. Up to the northeast from there, there's an area that you probably don't recognize the name of. It's called Gaulonitis, but Jesus spends a little bit of time there too. But it's the third region we're going to focus in on today. It's a place called the Decapolis. Can you say that with me? Decapolis. There we go. The Decapolis. Now, Deca means 10, like a decagon, 10 sides. Deca means 10. Polis means city. The Decapolis is the place of 10 cities, right? They were really, really clever when they were naming things in the ancient world. It's a place of 10 cities. And Jesus is going to go to the place of 10 cities, to the Decapolis in these stories today. But more specifically, he's going to go in that little yellow-orange region up there right next to the lake. Just in case you can't see it, I put arrows. So if you can't read the map now, I don't know how to help you. There's a pretty big region there, and the reason why I say he was somewhere in that region is because depending on the manuscript you look at, you actually get different names. I just want to address this in case different Bibles that you read this story and say different things. You see, there's this practice amongst historians, and we actually still do it today. It's called an anachronism. It's when there's some sort of name or some sort of term or some sort of something that shows up in a story that doesn't make sense anymore, so you replace it with a word or with a name that makes more sense. If you're reading a history textbook today, and it's talking about settling in the area that is now New York City, you will very rarely see the name New Amsterdam. There is a tiny little settlement on the southern tip of the island of Manhattan called New Amsterdam. It's a tiny little Dutch settlement. But we never really talk about it today. Unless you're specifically studying that settlement, you'll never say at the place of New Amsterdam because no one knows where that is, right? What they will say is they'll say on the southern tip of Manhattan Island, or they'll say Manhattan, or they'll say at New York City. Even though New York City did not yet exist, historians will still write at New York City, in New York City, in the location of New York City. It's called an anachronism. It's something that's out of place, that's out of time, but it makes sense to modern readers. So as the manuscripts of the New Testament were floating around, then someone would see a name, a city like perhaps Gadara, and would say, oh, that city doesn't exist anymore. It was a historian, they're well-educated individuals, and they say, that city doesn't exist anymore, but there's another city nearby that maybe my readers will know a little bit better, and so instead they write Gergesa, another city in the area. And then after a while, Gergesa ceases to exist. It starts being called by a different name, the name that you see up there, Hippos. And they go, okay, all right, so Gergesa doesn't exist anymore. We need a different name. So instead, they replace it with Gerasa. And what you end up with after you mine up all these different manuscripts is you get 3 different names for the exact same region. So Jesus was somewhere in this area. He's either in Gadara, that southern city there marked on the map, or he was in Gergesa, which is another name for an area near Hippos. It's also marked on the map. Or he was maybe in Gerasa, which is a little tiny town that isn't marked on the map. It was somewhere on that southern tip of the Sea of Galilee. At any rate, he was somewhere in this region. And it's very important to understand that both of the stories we're reading today happen somewhere in this area. Okay? Because when Jesus gets off the boat, enters into the Decapolis, somewhere near Gergesa or Gadara or Gerasa, or somewhere in that region, as he gets off the boat, he runs into a very unlikely hero. And we'll read about that story in Mark chapter 5, starting in verse 2. The scriptures read, when Jesus got out of the boat, a man with an impure spirit, other translations might say a demon, a man with a demon came from the tombs to meet him. This man lived in the tombs, and no one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain. For he had often been chained hand and foot, and he tore the chains apart and broke the irons on his feet. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Night and day amongst the tombs and in the hills, he would cry out and would cut himself with stones. Just a few verses later, there's an interesting exchange between these two. In Mark 5:9, Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" "My name is Legion," he replied, "for we are many." I want to take a minute to say a word on that word legion, because it kind of entered into our parlance, kind of entered into pop culture. Are there any fans here of X-Men? Like the X-Men movies? Yeah? Okay. So the X-Men movies are based off comics, right? I bet most of you probably knew that. And in the comics, there is this character whose superhero name is Legion. It's Professor X's son, actually. And he has his own television show now on Netflix or Hulu or something like that. But Legion gets his name. His name is inspired by this story in Scripture. The character has multiple personalities, and each personality has its own superpower. It's kind of like Split. And his name is inspired by this story. We're not talking about an individual with multiple personality disorder, or as it is known today, dissociative identity disorder. We are not talking about that. That is not what's going on here. Another use of this name comes from an not too old movie that came out maybe a decade or so ago, Ghost Rider. Anyone watch Ghost Rider? Yeah, it was a horrible movie. I'm sorry if you like it. It was not a good movie. My parents loved it, so I saw it a few times. It was a bad movie. It was a Nick Cage movie, and so it was a bad movie. And right at the end of the movie, he's in these like desert ruins. I have no idea where he's supposed to be, but he's in these desert ruins, and he comes up to this vessel that contains legion, the souls of 1,000 damned, or something like that. And it's supposed to be the source of this great evil power that people can harness and take over the world, or something like that. Standard superhero movie stuff, right? And he has to destroy legion. We're not talking about the 1,000 souls of damned individuals. That's not what's going on. It's not 1,000 evil souls. This is an individual who has been possessed by a number of demons. Some people even try to make a big deal out of the worst use of the word legion. They'll say, well, legion was 1,000 soldiers, and 1,000 is a number for perfection, so it's symbolizing, and that's not what's going on here either. Because when ancient people use that word legion, if they're talking about the Roman military, then yes, they'd be talking about a unit of soldiers of a specific strength. In this period of time, it would have been 2,000 to 5,000 soldiers. But when people who lived in the Roman Empire used that word legion in common parlance, they weren't talking about a specific number, they just meant a lot. It's kind of like how we use the word a ton. If my beautiful wife makes dinner one night, and she says, hey Jason, pull up a show on Netflix, we're going to watch some TV while we're eating dinner, I'll bring you your food, how much do you want? And I say, oh, I'm really hungry, I want a ton. I'm not telling her to bring me 2,000 pounds of food. I have an appetite, but I cannot eat that much. What I'm saying is, I'm really hungry, bring me a lot, right? In the same way, they use this term legion to refer to a large amount of something. Not a specific number, just a large amount. So when this individual says, my name is legion, he's saying, my name is a ton. A lot, because I have a ton or a lot of demons. You get it? So there's no significance to the individual number. It's just that this person is very much in the hands of demonic powers. He is very much in trouble. He is very much in pain. He's very much not in control of himself, and he needs help. And you probably predict what's going to happen next in the story. In Mark chapter 5, verses 11 through 20, it reads something like this. A large herd of pigs was feeding on a nearby hillside. I know that's a weird intro to this part of the story. We'll get there. A large herd of pigs was feeding on a nearby hillside, and the demons begged Jesus, send us amongst the pigs, allow us to go into them. And that's a really weird request. But again, we'll get there. He gave them permission. The impure spirits came out and went into the pigs. The herd, about 2,000 in number, rushed down the steep bank into the lake and were drowned. And I don't know about you, but this specific passage raises a whole lot of questions for me. Not the least of which is what happened to the poor little oinkers. Look, it's so cute. Why did 2,000 of those things have to die? First of all, maybe this will make some of you feel a little bit better. They probably weren't cute little oinkers. They were probably like big old hogs. But second of all, there's a lot of theories. There's a lot of theories about why 2,000 pigs have to die. Maybe that was the exact number of demons that was in the man. That's one idea. Another one is that the owners of the pigs were Jewish, and Jews weren't really supposed to eat pork, and they weren't really supposed to handle pork. And so by owning the pigs, they were committing a sin, and Jesus was just aggressively helping them get out of their sin. It's another idea. Another idea, common exorcism practices, still practiced in some area of the world, is if someone is believed to be possessed by a demon, they will attempt to cast the demon from one person into another individual. That individual is kind of a scapegoat, kind of a safety net for the entire community. So maybe the reason why this man, who is identified as Legion, has so many demons in him is because every time someone else was possessed in that region, the local exorcist would cast the demon into him. I don't know if that's possible or not. Never seen an exorcism, never done an exorcism, have no desire to be a part of one personally. Don't know about you, but I've seen the movies. They terrify me. So I don't know if that's the truth or not, but that's another possibility, right? There's a lot of possibilities, but ultimately I can say one thing with absolute certainty: no one in this room knows. No one in this room actually knows why thousands or hundreds or whatever number of demons was cast into a herd of pigs and why the pigs were drowned. No one actually knows why. Why? The Bible doesn't say. The Bible doesn't say, so we don't know. I have a professor that said that all the time. Sometimes the Bible kind of raises these questions, like why on earth would Jesus say yes to a bunch of demons? Why did 2,000 pigs have to drown? What does this accomplish? And we don't know because the Bible doesn't say. Maybe one day we'll get to ask him. But there's a significant thing in this passage, a significant fact that is very obvious. Regardless of the pigs, if you just leave out that entire part of the story, there's a very significant piece to this story that we have to understand, and that is that Jesus healed a man that was unhealable. That he cleansed a man that was uncleansable. That a man that they were terrified of, that was bound hand and foot and could never be contained, knelt before him. That a man that everyone else was so terrified of that he was relegated to the tombs, he couldn't even live in the village or in the city, that he stood before Jesus, and Jesus did not have an ounce of trepidation, did not have a drop of fear in him. And Jesus healed this man. And we figure the village would come flying out. Banners, confetti, party poppers. We figured they're going to be happy, right? Well, it's not quite how the story ends. Continuing on just a little further in Mark chapter 5 says, those tending the pigs ran off and reported this in the town and the countryside, and the people went out to see what had happened. When they came to Jesus, they saw the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons sitting there, dressed and in his right mind. And they were happy. They were joyful. They were amazed. They were surprised. Well, they might have been a little surprised. No. Mark says they were afraid. They were scared. Then the people began to plead with Jesus. They begged Jesus to leave their region. They come up to Jesus, and instead of saying, oh my gosh, this is amazing. You saved this man. They look at him and they say, you just killed 2,000 of our pigs. You just cost us a lot of money, Jesus. These pigs, I don't know how much pork went for by the pound. I don't know how much bacon was worth in Gadara 2,000 years ago. I'm not sure. But what I can tell you is 2,000 pigs is a lot of money. And Jesus just cost them a whole lot of bacon. Literally and metaphorically. He cost them a whole lot of money. And so they're probably a little bit angry. What's more than this, if someone can come in, talk to someone who is demon-possessed, who cannot be bound with even iron shackles, and can calm them down, that person's probably pretty powerful. If someone can wave a hand and 2,000 pigs go and drown themselves, that's a little bit terrifying. And so the townspeople see him, and instead of identifying him as God and worshiping them, they are terrified and they tell him to leave. And there's an interesting thing that we see about God constantly throughout the scriptures, that is, God does not go where he is not wanted. So Jesus leaves. As Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him. Jesus did not let him, but said, go home to your own people to tell them how much the Lord has done for you, and how he has had mercy on you. So the man went away and began to tell in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him, and all the people were amazed. Jesus had a tendency when he performed a miracle of telling people, don't tell anyone about this. And again, there's a lot of ideas why, but it normally doesn't explain why Jesus did this. Maybe it was because of the crowds, maybe it's because he didn't want the Jewish population to get the wrong idea about what kind of Messiah he was. We don't really know. But in this case, he looks at the man and he says, hey, I have a mission for you. You can't follow me physically, but you can follow me spiritually. I want you to go home, and I want you to tell your friends and family about this. I want you to tell your hometown. I want you to tell your city. And what I think is really great about this is when Mark summarizes this at the end, he says he began to tell in the Decapolis. He doesn't say he began to tell in Gadara. He doesn't say he told in his hometown. He doesn't say he told in the Gerasenes. No, he said he told in the entire region of the Decapolis. This is like if Jesus looked at one of you and said, hey, I want you to go up, and I want you to tell people about Jesus in St. Louis. I want you to tell people about my gospel in St. Louis. It's as if Jesus looked at you and said that, and you said, I'll do you one better. I'm going to get all of Illinois and all of Missouri. That's what this guy did. He was told to go and witness in Washington, D.C., and he got all of Maryland. He was told to go witness in Richmond, and he got all of Virginia. He was told to go witness in New York City, and he got the entire state. He's a little bit of an overachiever. This got me thinking. Bear with me. This is a little bit weird. It got me thinking. Have you guys seen Jumanji? Like the new one, right? Where they're like stuck in the video game and everything. Okay, so here's the beginning of the plot. It won't ruin anything for you if you haven't seen it. The main characters get stuck in a video game called Jumanji. And they have to play through the video game as the characters, like they're actually in it, like it's some sort of like 3D virtual reality thing. They have to play through as the characters in order to escape. If they lose all their lives in the game, then they die in real life. That's the plot. At one point, pretty early on in the movie, they realize that if they tap their chest, then this menu pops up that shows them all the strengths and weaknesses of the character they are playing as. So Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson taps his chest. So he's like out here, dude's huge. And so he's like thump thump. Menu pops up. He has like 7 strengths and no weaknesses. All right? I imagine that's what it's like for him in real life too. Like, just he's untouchable. He's bulletproof. Kevin Hart, who's like looking up at him like, "Can I get on the roller coaster, Dad?" He taps his chest, and this comes up. His strengths are zoology, and he is a weapons valet. He has tons of different tools and weapons in his big old backpack. His weaknesses are cake, speed, and strength. Some of us can empathize with those. Since I've started working here, I have gained so much weight because people keep feeding me sweets. For weakness, for cake. So I got thinking, I imagine the Gadarene demoniac. We don't know his name. I imagine if we came up with a strengths and weaknesses thing, Jumanji style for him, it would look a little bit more like Kevin Hart and a little bit less like The Rock, you know? This dude wasn't real prepared for the job in front of him. So I thought, what if I made him one? And I did. This man's weaknesses, as far as I can tell, first of all, he has the world's worst ex. Some of you think that your exes are bad, but they weren't a legion of demons. They may have acted like it. You may have viewed them as such, but they were not. This man literally had a past relationship with hundreds or thousands of demons. That's a lot of emotional baggage to be carrying around. On top of that, he was witnessing to a very hostile community. The Decapolis was a very Roman, very Gentile area. And Gentiles and Romans, people who were not Jewish, people who were very European, they did not like Jews very much. And Jews didn't like them very much. We don't know the ethnicity of the demon-possessed man, but we do know that when he gets sent into the Decapolis, he's preaching about a Jewish savior. He's saying that a 30-year-old Jewish male is the savior of the world. He's saying that a 30-year-old Jewish male is the King of Kings greater than Caesar. He's saying that a 30-year-old Jewish male is ready to change the world. That is not going to sit well in a Roman city. He has a very hostile community. And to make matters worse, he doesn't exactly have a good reputation to begin with. He's demon-possessed for years, decades maybe, and he had terrorized the countryside. Everyone was afraid of him. So he doesn't even have a good reputation to fall back on. He has a very hostile community. It's probably something that many of us can empathize with, because I'm sorry if I'm ruining some sort of illusion for somebody in the room or watching online, but America is not a Christian nation. It's not. And in many areas, America is very hostile to the message of Christianity. But we are still called to witness in our hometowns and in the surrounding regions and our Jerusalem, Samaria, and all of the world. We are still called to witness, even when they are hostile to our message. He is witnessing to a hostile community, and oftentimes so are we. And last of all, another thing that we can probably empathize with, he has a complete and utter lack of training. He's not prepared. He's not ready. He spent an hour, maybe 2, with Jesus. You know, while the angry mob was getting their pitchforks and torches, he just had a little bit of time with Jesus. He wasn't trained. He didn't attend a 4-part class after church each Sunday for a month to learn how to evangelize to his family and his friends. He didn't have that. All he was told was, go, tell them what God has done for you. That's all he had. Complete lack of training. But he had one very powerful, very significant strength. He had had an encounter with Jesus. He had had an encounter with Jesus. That was his only true strength. And if we look at this list, if we look at his strengths and his weaknesses, then we'd think, this isn't going to be real successful. He's not going to be very good at this. He might catch a few people here or there, but even a blind squirrel finds a nut every once in a while. This isn't going to end well. Well, if we read on a little bit further in Mark, then we actually find a very interesting thing. This man is exceedingly successful. He brings a whole lot of people who at least have a moderate amount of interest in Jesus. You see, Jesus leaves a region, but eventually he does come back. In Mark chapter 7, we're told that he returns to the Decapolis. In Mark chapter 8, he is still there. And the chapter begins like this. During those days, another large crowd gathered. A little bit later on, Mark clarifies a little further. After a really cool miracle there in the middle, about 4,000 people were present. And after he sent them away, he got into the boat with his disciples and went to the region of Dalmanutha, something. I can't pronounce it. He comes back into a region he was just kicked out of probably just a few months prior. And when he returns, a huge crowd gathers, about 4,000 people. Well, at minimum, 4,000 people. You see, when they counted people in gatherings in those days, especially the Jews, they tended to only count the men. So it was probably 4,000 men, plus many of their wives, plus many of their children. This easily could have been a crowd of 10,000 people. And I'm going to ruin the miracle in the middle for you just a little bit. Jesus has to feed them. Okay, there's the feeding of the 5,000. There's also the feeding of the 4,000, which we tend not to talk about quite as much because I guess 1,000 less people is a little less impressive, whatever. But Jesus has to feed them, which means not only was there a crowd of maybe even 10,000 people present, but on top of all of that, they were so enthused, they were so excited about meeting Jesus and hearing him teach, they forgot to pack lunch. What takes an entire region from hating Jesus so much that they kicked him out to being willing to skip a meal just to hear him preach over the course of 3 or 4 months? Well, there had to be somebody telling them the amazing things that Jesus could do, telling them the type of person that Jesus is, the type of God that Jesus is. There had to be somebody, and the only follower of Jesus we know of in this entire region was the Gadarene demoniac. The man that identified himself as Legion, the man who had hundreds or thousands of demons in him. This is a part of the story that we don't talk about very often. Possibly the most successful evangelist in Jesus' ministry was not Jesus himself, was not one of his apostles, but was a demon-possessed man that Jesus spent about an hour and a half with. That's amazing. But it also helps us to answer a question. We asked, can we witness confidently and effectively, even when we have no training, even when we have no preparation? And the answer is yes, we can. We can witness to family members, to friends, to bosses, and to coworkers, to people that are hostile to Christianity, to people that are already interested, and to people that honestly are just really neutral on the whole thing. We can witness to all of them. And why? Because one encounter with Jesus outweighs any weakness, any lack of preparation, any lack of coaching. One encounter with Jesus outweighs any weakness. What was the method the Gadarene demoniac used? What was the method that Legion used as he went out into the Decapolis and somehow brought thousands upon thousands of people to be interested in following Jesus? I imagine he did exactly what Jesus told him to do. Go and tell them what the Lord has done for you. So what's our secret? That family member that we've been just working on for weeks, for months, or for years, that just won't listen. Have you tried just telling them what God has done for you? It's not a silver bullet. I'm not saying they're going to drop everything and say, man, I got to go to church this weekend. But have you tried telling them what God has done for you? That boss that you're like, man, that dude is scary, or that chick is scary, and I'm just not really sure this is something I should bring up in their presence. Have you tried having them out to dinner, them, their spouse, sitting down, and just saying, hey, I've worked with you for a while, and there's just something I wanted to tell you about. And just told them, not all the reasons why the Bible is true, not all the reasons why your church is awesome, but just tell them, what has God done for you? It could be other students you go to school with. It could be your parents. It could be your children or your grandchildren. It could be any individual in your life. And I imagine that many of you probably have someone in mind right now that you think, if I knew that I would be successful, I would tell them. Why don't you? Even if you feel unprepared, uncoached, unready. You've had an encounter with Jesus, and that outweighs any weakness. Can I pray for you? Lord,